Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. 1 week, one trouble. It's a 1972 novel by Nigerian writer Professor Anezi Okoro. But for Nigerians, in the past couple of days, it's been 1 week, many troubles. From Kebbi to Kwara, Niger to Borno, there's been a sudden resurgence of kidnappings and increased insurgent activities. Are these incidents spurred by politics or religion, and what can be done to address the situation? Let's deepen the discussion now as a political scientist who is currently the Executive Director, Center for Peace Building and Socioeconomic Resources Development. Dr. Kunle Fagbemi joins us now from our Abuja studio. Dr. Fagbemi is also a doctoral fellow of the Institute for Global Peace and Conflict Management and a senior fellow at the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Good morning, Dr. Fagbemi, and thank you for joining us on the Morning Show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, very quickly, Dr. Fagbemi, I was saying the other day that we've been in this business of conflict resolution, peace building since the 80s. Atasini riot and all of that, committees, the Abisoye-led panel, the various panels of inquiry on the just crisis, but no results up to 2025. Now, in more recent times, we have had some kind of physiology, security architecture, kinetic, non-kinetic, but the situation seems to be getting worse. More persons have been abducted in the last 10 days alone in Nigeria than at any other time. So what is the problem? What are we dealing with? The failure of the state, the incompetence of the intelligence agencies, or just the fact that kidnapping and violence has become business and the state is not addressing criminality? What do you think? And how do we build peace going forward?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's unfortunate that we have to discuss this subject matter again. And the most important reason why we are going through this cycle of national security breaches again and again is very simple. Successive administration, with the exception of very few, are willing to follow to the letter their own manifesto, for example. They are unwilling to obey the Constitution the way they should obey it, even though the President Commander-in-Chief, when he's taking the oath of office, oath of allegiance, do normally subscribe to the fact that he will obey and implement and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Unfortunately, this is not. I'll give you an instance. The incumbent administration campaigned on the notion of a renewed hope agenda, and on the 5th page of that renewed hope agenda manifesto of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it is written that the national security of the Nigerian state, which happens to be the first cardinal important trajectory for his manifesto, says that national security is considered to be the bedrock of a prosperous and democratic society. And to this end, the fundamental, and I'm quoting now, permit me to read, the fundamental responsibility of government is to protect the lives and property of its citizens. We will mobilize the totality of our national security, military, and law enforcement assets to protect all Nigerians from danger and from the fear of danger. We will expand and improve upon the use of technology, enhance recruitment of personnel, and bolster existing agencies and systems to achieve this fundamental goal. And it proceeded to say our administration will be committed to permanently securing the safety, freedom, and prosperity of all Nigerians. This 2 paragraphs from his renewed hope agenda gave us an understanding that he has a clear-cut idea about what has to be done. But unfortunately, today is the 910th day in office as President Commander-in-Chief. And today being the 910th day, we can see that the Constitution has not been obeyed to the letter, which is the bane of most administration. Yesterday, a meeting held at the State House complex in the office of the President Commander-in-Chief. Painfully, this meeting was reported that the President was meeting with a group of people called service chiefs. Unfortunately, by the virtues of the provisions of the Constitution, a president does not meet with service chiefs. The President Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces only meets in Security Council provided for by the Constitution and or the Defense Council, of which service chiefs are members. Yesterday, at best, what we can describe held yesterday was a communication strategy meeting. Because when you look at those who were in attendance, you had Bayo Ononuga, the special advisor on information, you had Sunday Dare, and then you have a minister who hitherto was in charge of information and strategy, Dele Alake, and then you have the incumbent Minister of Information and Orientation, Idris. It therefore means that yesterday was not a proper meeting that had to do with security matters. Because if they had a meeting that had to genuinely do with security matters, it should have been held as Security Council. And permit me, Dr. Abati, to read from the Constitution the case section of the 3rd schedule that talks about the national security. The membership of the National Security Council shall comprise the following members: the President, who shall be the chairman, the Vice President, who shall be the Deputy Chairman, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Minister of Government of the Federation charged with the responsibility for internal affairs, that's the Minister of Interior, the Minister of the Government of the Federation that is charged with the responsibility for defense, the Minister of the Government of the Federation charged with the responsibility for foreign affairs, the National Security Advisor, the Inspector General of Police, and such other persons as the President may, in his discretion, appoint. Dr. Abati, you were privileged to have served in the State House complex and the presidency of the Nigerian state. And you do understand that if you do not hold council meetings, and it is expected of these statutory members that are going to come to Security Council, they must come with council memos, which will allow us to discuss issues. Yesterday, we had a press statement issued by the certain Bayo Ononuga again, talking about the fact that they needed to demobilize away from the VIP's policemen. That is good. We have always talked about this over and over again, and that they were now going to shift the responsibility to the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps. How can you discuss such a matter, an inchoate meeting where the Minister of Interior, who is the supervising minister of the entity called the Nigerian Security, Civil and Defense Corps? So we are where we are today in terms of the security breaches and challenges that we're having, primarily because the people that have been occupying offices in the last 10 years in particular, 2015 till date, have not been sincere to obey the Constitution. I thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fagbemi, for your opening statement. Now, to probe further, some of the interventions, orders by the president since these kidnappings, abductions in school. For instance, in Kebbi State, he's asked that the Minister of State for Defense, Bello Matawale, who was once the governor of Zamfara State, that was also plagued by terrorism and banditry, go be present, stationed in Kebbi State. What do you think about such interventions? Are they sufficient enough? So this is in addition to the recruitment of 30,000 police personnel, the pulling out of police officers from VIPs and politically exposed persons. To what extent do you think these interventions would work? And what is the president not doing yet that he ought to be doing with regards to addressing the security concerns?
The decision to send some dramatis personnel of the Nigerian state, public office holders, to some locus inco, as it were, some theaters of issues of national security, are cosmetic. And when you really want to deal with national security discourses, you must obey the legal and policy frameworks. For example, there was no need for a minister to leave Abuja to go there if truly we have proper governance structure and statecraft operations in place. And how do I mean? An incident occurred in Kebbi State at a particular location called Maga. You have the divisional police officer. You have the local government offices of the state services, security services. Ideally, these offices are supposed to send in their reports, in the case of the police, to the area command to the state command, and then ultimately from the state command, 2 reports emerge. One goes to the AIG in charge of that zone, and then the other one comes straight to the Inspector General of Police at the Eagle Room. They will be seeing it there. And incidentally, we now have something at the National Security Advisor's Office, which is a multi-agency, interactive and integrated situation room. That same report must be there. Ideally, if all those levels of reporting and strategic multi-tiered intervention had been taking place, we would have been able to do a decisive thing. But again, it is simply because we are failing. And you can cross-check, and I ask and I plead with you to send your security correspondent to investigate this. Many are times when some of these security breaches occur, the divisional police officer, the divisional crime officer are usually not within the jurisdiction. If that is the case, those are the issues that you are supposed to be dealing with. So you do not just ask for a minister to relocate. When the minister or the service chief relocates, everything will be done in a cosmetic manner. And all of us are very familiar that in the last 10 years, we have had situations where the president commander-in-chief, that is the incumbent in the case of Buhari, and even the current one, they will ask these officers to go to those jurisdictions where there have been problems. It is either they do not go. A certain Idris Putum, as Inspector General of Police, did not go to Benue. He only stayed in Nasarawa. When we had the unfortunate incident in Benue again, when the IG was supposed to go, he did not really move, but waited until the commander-in-chief was on site. And painfully, all they had was a banter. Now, in the real sense of it, what we are supposed to do is to start emphasizing the need to ensure that the police do what they are supposed to do based on the provisions of the Police Act. When they do all they are supposed to do, and this is the reason why they are now saying, oh, it is partly because we do not have enough men on ground. Yes, if you do not have enough men on ground, we need to do the correct thing. Release those people that are doing VIP protection. We welcome that. However, that is not just a good thing to continue to do. It's just a stopgap measure. To recruit 30,000, I clap for them and I appreciate them. But unfortunately, before these 30,000 men that will be recruited can actually functionally serve in the police, you will be talking of minimum of 6 months to 9 months before they can graduate. Let us assume that they successfully recruit them today. They cannot be deployed. But again, if you are really interested, the national security strategy of the Nigerian state says all of government, all of society. The question is, are you really interested? And this is where it becomes very painful to some of us. The incumbent chief of staff to this president commander-in-chief, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, presided over a summit that came up with recommendations in 2021, and you would have expected that by now, what this certain Femi Gbajabiamila would have done, using the good offices of being chief of staff, is just to produce a memo, an advisory memo, that he can present to his principal that should have been discussed at the National Security Council. If some of the recommendations of that particular summit are being implemented in the last 910 days that this government has been in office, we should not be talking about some of these issues.
Absolutely. And like you rightfully say, we've had several forums that have held discussions, solutions have been preferred, but it's for some reason it's not translating. Now, one element that has reared its head in this is, of course, the geopolitical element, given the status of the region with our neighbors, and then, of course, with some of the international players who are now involved, the United States and so forth. Unfortunately, it has made this security crisis fertile ground for conspiracy. And I'm so glad we have somebody of your caliber to help us to pick this apart. And I'd just like to understand, from a geopolitical perspective, what do you think is real with regards to forces that are at play and exacerbating our situation here in Nigeria? And what should the focus be?
Thank you, Vembai, for the question. The most important thing we need to understand when you want to bring the discourse and dynamics of geopolitics onto the table when you're discussing national security is for you to appreciate the fact that the Constitution is very mindful, and that is why I'm emphasizing that the incumbent administration and successive ones, particularly the immediate past one, are not failing to obey the Constitution. You will discover that the crafters of the Constitution said that the ministers of Interior and Foreign Affairs are part of the Security Council. I challenge you. I want you to ask how many times as a Minister of Interior and a Minister of Foreign Affairs participated in Security Council or security discussions in the State House. Now, going further, a certain delegation is now in the United States discussing, and unfortunately, from the data they produced and gave to us, the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency is not included. Ideally, that ought to have been. And you are not supposed to have an advisor to the President Commander-in-Chief leading a delegation that is comprised of a minister. At best, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs that is on that delegation should actually have led that delegation. So when you have a government or a system that is operating in aberration of the constitutional and legal and policy frameworks of the Nigerian states, will always have these issues. You're talking about the fact that there is geopolitical dimensions and then international forces. Nigeria belongs to ECOWAS, the African Union, United Nations, Commonwealth, Lake Chad Basin. And each of these entities have what is called the peace and security architecture that are very detailed and important. And there are some protocols and principles, one of which is the responsibility to protect, which allows the global system, the international community, to say you need to act based on your own constitution for the security and safety of your people. You must not allow mass criminal atrocities to be committed without being interrogated. And that is why you have the R2P, which allows, again, for member states of the global community to intervene if need be. Now, when you look at the need for the Interior Ministry and the Foreign Affairs to participate in the security, it means that they will be coming with analysts and reports of these analysts that will come to show clearly how do we manage the fact that Nigeria belongs to the Sahelo-Saharan conflict system. And when you are able to see that clearly, you see that there is a need for you to transcend and understand how to relate with all these issues. The main thing that we are dealing with is that the incumbent administration, unfortunately, is not allowing itself to be governed properly and advised in such a way that they will manage these issues. Hopefully, I'm hoping that after this kind of intervention, we will have a recalibration and not a situation where the information managers of the presidency and the Ministry of Information are the one that will be gathered.
Dr. Fagbemi, I mean, I buy your point completely that the composition of that meeting was a bit, disturbing. The Minister of Defense is available. Why was he not there too? The Minister of Interior is available. Why was he not there too? So, but the presidency can just say, well, it wasn't meant to be a national security meeting. It could well have been a strategy meeting with persons of the choice chosen by the president himself. And then even the team to the US, led by a national security advisor. I mean, that's the NSA is an advisor to the president. So it looks like the presidency taking over, almost all the functions. It could have been led by ministers. Ministers were sent there as persons following an advisor. So the Americans, they will have noticed that. But all of that, we hope that, the more knowledge that they acquire as they stay in office, the more they will correct some of these omissions. But let me ask you, you talked about recalibration. How do we recalibrate? How do we address the urgent problems before us now? The way forward.
Going forward, the most important component of services delivery, and in your opening statement, you talked about people you branding some labels and concepts, national security, defense management architecture. The architecture are the legal and policy frameworks that allows you to understand that you have these entities, about 60 odd entities that have one thing or the other to do with national security and defense management. The most important is we need to now start talking about national security and defense management services delivery. To appreciate this, I'll just talk about policing. Policing is a triad. You have statutory police component of it, and then you have the informal neighborhood watch policing, and then you have the quasi, and that is where you have the paramilitary and the Nigerian security and civil defense, and all those components of private security outfits. It is time for us to begin to interrogate and integrate how we can bring a seamless cooperation, and as such, ensure that the provisions of the national security strategy are followed to the letter. The provisions of the Nigerian Police Act is obeyed. I'll give you a good example. When incidents occur and people die, Regulation 420 of the Nigerian Police Act subsidiary regulation says that this must be properly documented. The unfortunate aspect of it is that many of these are not properly documented, and that is why we can have government officials trying to discourage people from saying this is the demography that was most affected. It is not whether a demography was it. It is the fact that you can immediately see that these individuals that were killed were victims of crimes and criminalities. I'll give you a simple understanding of the need to obey the legal and policy frameworks. Some people went into a school. That means that was a criminal trespass. When they got into the school, for them to force their way through, they attacked the security gate man that was there and injured or killed. And then they killed a principal, vice principal in another school. That in itself shows that they are criminally trespassing. Based on the criminal and penal codes, these people must be investigated and brought to book. When they now pick children, we have the law that talks about the fact that you are either doing kidnapping, and since minors are now involved, the Child Abuse Act now becomes relevant. It therefore means that when you are dealing with violent extremism, you cannot sue moto, wake up one day and say you are granting amnesty without first trying these individuals after profiling them for the crimes and criminalities they have committed. And if it is true that some of these characters have ended up being integrated back to the society and to the extent of being absorbed into the Nigerian army or the armed forces as it were, that means we are already on a time bomb. And there is no guarantee that the 30,000 policemen that are to be recruited are going to end up not coming from that same constituency. Should that be the case, and the geopolitics that Vinberg was wanting me to talk about, when you now start looking at it from the angle of the global terror networking and the dynamics of extremism that is prevalent, and we are now having ISIS, ISWAP, you're having all this Boko Haram, you begin to see that we are going to end up, if care is not taken, recruiting some of these characters that have criminal tendencies into the police. Should we do that, then we can as well talk about the fact that there was a country like Chinua Achebe wrote in a book.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kunle Fagbemi. Apparently, 30,000 policemen won't even be enough. We probably need up to about 190,000 more for this environment to be more properly policed, closer to the UN recommendation. Thank you very much.